Hey, welcome back to the Invisible Strength Podcast. I'm your co-host and autoimmune advocate, Karin Wagner, and I'm joined as always by the amazing Burton. I'm very excited about today's episode. I think one of the unique things about this podcast is that we are able to talk to people all over the world. These conditions do not discriminate by location by any means. Today, our guest, Krissy Ward, joins us from the United Arab Emirates, which is quite incredible. Krissy, we are so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We know that these conditions can take up a big part of our lives, but they definitely don't define us. Krissy, for people who don't know you yet, how do you introduce yourself without talking about your conditions?
So my first answer is, hi, I'm just Krissy. That is me. I'm Krissy. But to give a bit more context, I'm a British national and I live and work overseas. I absolutely obsessed with different cultures and parts of the world. And a big part of that makes me a nomad at heart. So yeah, I'm just Krissy, the nomad.
I love that so much. Krissy, you have lived with chronic illness for 2 decades now. If you think back to before these conditions took up a big space in your life, what did it feel like?
It was effortless. If I think back to, going to your late teens, early 20s, it should be effortless, because you're young, you've got so much energy. But I don't think I realized how much of a privilege that was to have that sense of, invincibility. You just have your armor on as a young female, and you just assume that tomorrow's guaranteed, and it really isn't. And I think that's the one before, where it makes you dawn in that no, we're not invincible and tomorrow isn't guaranteed and we do not have endless energy. There's one thing aging and just going through life, but to be in your early 20s and to be pretty much flatlined when I should be partying all night and like going to work on 1 hour's sleep, it just wasn't a thing. Yeah, that privilege was taken away for sure. So if hindsight's a great thing. If I kind of reflect back on my journey, I would say, my first major red flag was anaphylactic shock as a teenager. But back then it was like, yep, you're allergic to nuts. Carry on with your life and don't eat nuts. And you don't connect the dots until obviously your journey has continued to go on. And I think because I was in Kuwait in my early 20s and I'd met my husband, now my partner, and life was really busy. We were both working hard and it was wartime effort back then as well. So my husband was really, really busy with what was happening in the region. I was doing my job, and the flag was, why am I so tired? And the assumption was, it's just so hot. It's the heat, everybody's tired, everybody's dehydrated. So that kind of continued to go on. And as you do, you ignore so many signs. And in all honesty, autoimmune awareness 20 years ago was anywhere but the United States, wasn't really heard of. I'll be like, auto what? Even from my standpoint. And in the Middle East, dealing with foreign national doctors, it was, fine, labs are fine, carry on, it's heat, you're dehydrated. So that made me continue to ignore those signs and symptoms. And we actually moved to the States. My husband was posted in the States in 2012, and we moved to Florida. And I was so excited to live in Florida, out of the Middle East to the real world, what I deemed a real world. And we lived in it was like the movies for us being Brits, coming to America and the pretty community, the white picket fences. And I was still tired. And I wasn't allowed to work at that point in the States because I didn't have the right visa. So I was literally living in Florida on vacation. My husband actually worked a 9 to 5. I could time the garage. He was like, we lived the perfect life. And all I had to do was look after myself. I could swim. I could go to the gym. I could take the dog out for a walk. I had this beautiful house. I had the perfect life, right? And I was still exhausted. And that was when I started to say, something's not right. And Google really wasn't a thing. Google Maps hardly worked when I lived in Florida, never mind the encyclopedia access that we have today. And it was like this inflammation that would never settle. I would go and do a major leg day because obviously I was surrounded by all these muscle crazy people and I thought I was going to be a bodybuilder and I was inspired. And it was that era, right, of bodybuilding, and I'm in the gym and like, bro, yeah, I've got this. But it was one particular leg day and it was brutal. But it took me 12 days to recover. And I was training with a guy called JT, and I'm like, dude, like, I can't do legs. Like, he's like, oh, come on, don't be weird. I'm like, no, to touch my legs, they're so painful. I was like, you would have thought I'd done like 100 kg squats, like, I was like, I'm in agony and nothing's recovering. And he's like, yeah, that's really quite odd. Do you think it's something to do with, because we kind of already had a little bit of a thyroid issue. It's probably, your immune system's overloaded. We probably trained a bit hard, go and have a refeed days, go and have a refeed, chill out and let's see how you feel. And it was almost like my systems were misfiring. And I still hadn't put two and two together. As a sports nutritionist, at this point I was sports, not clinical. I had not put two and two together because we are not educated in sports nutrition to be looking at systemic inflammation, right? We're not looking at chronic illness. We're not looking at anything medical other than how do you get an athlete to perform their best, right? Nutritionally. So, and then it's that realization that I need help. And then we got relocated again back to Kuwait. So that all went out the window. I was tired because we were relocating. And of course, I was packing, shipping, doing. So we blame that chronic fatigue on relocation. And then sadly, not long to follow, my dad passed away whilst visiting us in Kuwait. So then all of that got blamed on your dad passed away. It was traumatic. It's your immune system. We go down the depression. It's anxiety. It's grief. You experienced a trauma. So everything, all this compounding effect for all the years up into that point was just being blamed on my lifestyle. But I knew that it wasn't, because I was at my fittest. I was running half marathons. I was lifting big weights. I was, working a full-time job. My nutrition was on point, like 110% on point. I had no inflammatory markers in my food. Like, I was doing everything. And that was that build up to that point was when I went, no, this isn't just about thyroid issues or having funky glucose markers occasionally. And and one of them was my cholesterol had gone high. And I'm like, that's impossible. Like, it is impossible to have a high cholesterol. Yeah, exactly how? When you're so fit and your nutrition, like, I would not eat 1 gram over on any macronutrient because I was so obsessed with trying to make myself feel good. I was not in a caloric deficit. I was fueling my body. I was doing everything textbook. And yet my body kept breaking. That was I think, point that I remember just crying, going, I can't go to work today. I am so tired. I can't think. I can't. It's almost like I couldn't breathe, like I was suffocating, to the point that I actually thought it was in my head. I'm like, have I got Munchausen's? There's something wrong with me. I think you start thinking you're going a little bit crazy. So it was really a 10-year journey for me to say, no, this is not normal. This is not normal metabolic behavior. This isn't right. So yeah, I think that was my burnout moment. Was probably a year after my dad died. And I'm going, this isn't grief. This isn't anything that I'm doing. I'm not overtraining. I'm nourishing. Something isn't working. Yeah. And that's where the investigation, and they still got it wrong. So that got up to that point 1 of major investigation.
So much of what you're saying, Krissy, just sounds so familiar when we talk to folks, and both what Karin and I experienced in our own journey trying to figure out exactly what was going on, where you start to wonder, is it me? Like, am I just making all this up? Am I just mad? Am I losing my mind even? Like, you're seeing all this. So that so much of what you're saying is just so painfully familiar. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you.
And I wanted to call out the fact that it's so easy to make up reasons or attribute these unexplainable symptoms to various life events. I appreciate the fact that it can take so long to have the awareness and the courage to be like, okay, this isn't all in my head. Something is seriously wrong. Can you take us through that point where, okay, now you know that something is happening within you and it's not to your fault because you're wholeheartedly taking care of yourself? How did you get the treatment that you needed, especially in Kuwait and dealing with other cultures and navigating that?
So I will take you up to 2024 because 2025 was the big game changer. So I will save the finale part for later on. So we were obviously in Kuwait, and my first stop was go to the internationally recognized private hospital. I was having huge gut problems, so I started with gastroenterology. We did colonoscopies, and guess what? It was like, well, we can give you some antidepressants because, your IBS is probably triggered by anxiety and stress. And I'm like, there's an Arabic phrase, which is kaliwali, which means like whatever, anyhow, like kaliwali or antidepressants. I am not taking antidepressants because that is, yes, the serotonin level can help with your IBS, but it's a Band-Aid again. Like thyroxine was a Band-Aid for the for the underactive thyroid. No. And one of my close friends, she's a psychologist, and I rang her and I'm like, you crazy? Do I need this? She's like, no, you're not crazy, and do not take it. I'm like, thank you. Moving on. So that was step one. So I wasn't happy with the outcome of that. And I'm like, no, I will go to an internal medicine doctor. Oh, you're overworking. Do you not, as being a woman now in the Middle East who's athletic, who's exercising, who's taking care of her husband, I don't have house staff. I don't have a driver. Wow, shame, you have to work. That must be very hard for you, right? So you imagine presenting yourself back then as a working class woman. Shame on my husband for letting his wife go to work, right? Like, do you not think you're doing too much, or you're too busy, or, maybe your long distance running could be a problem here? So I'm like, yeah, you're not my doctor. And this went on and on and on. And then eventually I found an Eastern European doctor. I think he was Serbian or Croatian. And I thought, okay, he's European. There's a level of connectivity. And he went, yes, you're pre-diabetic and you have an issue with your cholesterol. You continue with your thyroid medication, but here's some statins and here's some glucophage. And I'm like, I'm not diabetic. That's impossible. I cannot be diabetic. There's no way. If my lifestyle, if I'm diabetic, goodness gracious me, if I have a Burger King and a milkshake, I'm probably going to die, right? Like you're saying, like statins and glucophage is a solution. I don't think so, but I'm not medically qualified to argue this. So this is where my clinical education started to come into the background. I took myself off to night school to study to be a clinical practitioner. So I'm like, no, if I have to fix myself, I'm going to do this. But obviously that was a good 5-year journey in the background. Then we got relocated to the Emirates, and my husband's like, it's going to be the best thing for you. The hospitals are better. Let's get your feet on the ground. And I went to the Dubai London clinic because I just felt at home when it said Dubai London clinic. I thought I was going to walk in and see mini London. I didn't. I saw mini India, which is okay. Some amazing doctors from India, but I'm like, okay, that was assumptuous of me that it was going to be a British-run clinic. And I did meet a really nice doctor, and I just kind of explained everything that was going on, that I didn't take the statins, and I've been even reducing my fats even further to try and reverse whatever's going on with my cholesterol and insulin handling. And she did a wellness woman's checkup. So we did a bit of a deep dive into, like hormone health, and we took deeper dives into like the HOMA-IR insulin handling aspects. And she's like, yeah, your body's just not quite synchronized, but, just continue. We can increase your thyroxine. It's not uncommon that you can have issues with cholesterol and, your insulin handling with thyroxine, and explained a little bit more about, the thyroid and how it works. I'm like, yeah, that's not new to me, but thank you. And she's like, we can repeat your labs in 6 months. And I remember going to the car, and I had to drive to Dubai from Ras Al Khaimah because I'm in Ras Al Khaimah, and it was like a big thing driving from here to the other emirate in my new car in a busy city. And I'm so overwhelmed. I have to drive back, and I was in floods of tears because I felt so like, okay, we made progress with pathology and someone actually hearing me, but I haven't made any progress here. And then it just came with me persevering of like visiting doctors, and finally somebody checked my antibodies. And they were off the charts. And they're like, you've got Hashimoto's. That will make sense. We don't, we can pretty much guarantee if this is how you've been feeling, it's Hashimoto's, and nothing changes. You continue to take your thyroxine, but, maybe consider slowing down a little bit and prioritizing rest and stress. And I'm like, Hashimoto's, okay, go home. Remember this Hashimoto's. What is this Hashimoto's business? As we all did, Google was getting better at that point. So I'm on, explain to me more about Hashimoto's, reading clinical studies and stuff. And I'm like, okay, my body's just attacking my body, but that's nothing new. And then every incident after that I had up until last year was blamed on Hashimoto's. My body fractured my own jaw, a whole other story. I'm getting, like, literally, I had reconstructive jaw surgery. The TMJ pulled so much that it broke a tooth, and on extraction of the tooth, it fractured my jaw. And, there's all these things that go on. And I had a lump in the middle of COVID grow on my chest wall, and I had emergency surgery because it was growing between my rib cage. But very common with autoimmune, the fatigue and perimenopause. Like, I genuinely thought we're going through menopause because my hormones were starting to shut down. So every appointment led to, it's autoimmune disease. It's nothing that you can do other than try to regulate your well-being. That was how you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. And even for me at this point, I had graduated in my clinical studies. Even I'm like, yeah, it's autoimmune life. It sucks. And I'm doing everything right. And that's all I can do is just try and balance everything out. But I can't explain a broken jaw. I can't explain random nodules growing on my body and surgically being removed and all of this thing. I was like, well, just take it as it comes. You're going to have flares and you're going to come in and out of them. Meanwhile, I'm still running. I'm still training. I'm still horse riding. We're still sailing. We're living this really active life to try and be proactive. You're in agony, but you're like, well, suck it up, buttercup, because keep calm and carry on. That's what you get preached to. So you do just that. Now in hindsight, maybe should have done a little bit less, but I also love life, so why should I have to stop and play dead to it? Like, I don't want to. I don't believe that's the way. Psychologically, having a purpose, being busy, I think for me is something that just keeps that fire in me to keep going, So yeah, that's kind of lots of doctors, lots of really bad doctors, lots of wrong diagnoses, lots of band-aids, lots of, you're female, your anxiety, you sure it's not related to PMS, and just everybody else blaming everything else but the elephant in the room. Does that make sense? Nobody actually talking about, at this point, the Hashimoto's, and why is my Hashimoto so bad compared to everybody else's? Again, maybe it's me. Is this all, am I manifesting this? The Munchausen question comes back. Like, am I creating this problem for myself, searching for answers that maybe don't exist? So then you start to give up. I'll ignore this symptom. I can't be bothered to go and do my labs, because what are they going to do? Just increase the thyroxine or decrease it? I can figure that one out by myself, by my heart rate. I've learned all of this. So then you do start to just ignore it and just carry on and be like, yeah, it's just an autoimmune day. It's fine. I'll be okay. It's just an autoimmune week. It's just an autoimmune year, and like, you haven't got through a whole year without having a nap every single day because you are exhausted, but that's apparently normal, which we actually all know isn't. We shouldn't all be having to sleep every single day of the week and plan your day around napping to get through a work day at this point in your 30s. That's not okay. Yeah.
Talk to us a bit about that sort of cultural expectation to, carry on and have a stiff upper lip with the sort of ways in which you're listening to your body. Because, with someone who has such drive as how you've described yourself, Krissy, there has to have been, I'm presuming there was a bit of like grief and bargaining with the sense of, I want to keep living my life. Like, you enjoy life, and yet still your body can only do so much.
So I think there was a phase of like imposter syndrome. I felt like if I didn't do everything, I'm failing. For a living, I'm advocating for health and wellness and helping people navigate, what we've all experienced, finding them answers, finding them solutions. And I thought, well, if I can't get this right, I'm no good at what I'm doing. So I think this was the biggest issue for me. Is I think part of me, this carry on was, I don't want to fail at what I truly believe so deeply in health and wellness, because, I don't think if I slow down or quit, I failed at what I do for a living, right? And I think that's the connection here of I felt like I would fail, not just myself, but my professional self. When I am that, go get them, guys. This is what you need to do to achieve your goals, to feel good, whatever your goal may be, that self-awareness, taking care of yourself. And also you're borderline hypocritical, right? Because I'm doing all that, but also grabbing a power nap, because otherwise I can't finish my clients for the rest of the day. And I'm still going to go to the gym because I want to motivate everybody else. Like, hey, have you guys done your workouts today? Whether that's just a walk or mindfulness or, activities did start to slow a little bit. I wasn't still benching, like 100 pounds in the gym and squatting 100 kilos, getting older as well. But there's still that daily movement, like nourishing your body with movement and nutrition and wellness. And yeah, I just think that slowing down, keeping calm and carrying on, that's also a very British trait of it's my parents' fault. That's a very generational thing for me. It's like you don't admit that you are ill. You don't admit that you are sad. Everybody is fine. The weather is beautiful, even if it's not. You know, we don't lose face in the British culture, especially in the north of England, right? Plus, yeah, I'd worked so hard to have 2 degrees, one in sports nutrition and one in clinical nutrition. To me, slowing down and stopping would equal I failed. I am useless. And I had a lot of those conversations with my husband. I'm like, I just don't understand. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I have studied everything completely wrong. Maybe my professor didn't read my thesis properly. Does that make sense? You know, all of these things. I would start to dig deep into that, like, I can't do this job anymore. I need to quit because I'm failing myself. So how can I take care of other people? So almost not stopping. If I had stopped, I think at that point I would have given up my job, which
Yeah.
now I would not. Today in
Right.
2026, absolutely would not have done that. But that was really, I guess, how emotionally, internally broken I was. But I couldn't express that vulnerability to my friends because I'm the go-getter. Everybody, I'm the caretaker. I'm the mother hen. People in supermarkets gravitate and I will know them for 5 minutes and know all of their life's problems. It's just my energy. I am the caretaker. So how can I not provide that and not be that person? Because then I failed in my friendships. Not taking care of my husband, not that he asked me to, I choose to. I want to cook his dinner and keep the house nice and look after him. He's a hardworking guy. Not doing that, I would be useless and I would be a failure. So what's the point of being married? Because I'm no good to you because I am broken. So it's this big emotional loophole. If I stop doing any of these things, I failed. And we don't fail as Brits. Like, we don't like to lose. Like, we it's not in our fighting spirit. You know, you keep calm and you carry on. You get on to the next day and tomorrow's a new day. And yeah, so I think that is probably the psyche there is if I'd stopped, it probably would have broken me mentally to have stopped. I can cope with physical brokenness, but not mental, you know, because this is absolutely fine. Cognitively, it's sharp, you know, thank God I'm so lucky. So yeah, I think that if I'd stopped, it would have been game over.
So often we wrap so much of our personal worth and value in how much we can produce and provide for other people. And you are very much in that boat as far as wanting to take care of other people, wanting to be helpful and be loved by the people around you. And a lot of times that can come back to what we're doing on a daily basis. But with these conditions, as you are well aware, oftentimes we'll get to a point where it's like it's just no longer an option because our body has taken such a toll. So how did you navigate the grief of the life you loved in your early 20s and all these continuous challenges that you ran into over a number of years?
I think acceptance, gradually starting to accept the reality. And this will backtrack to the New York chapter. That was really the pivoting point of all of this, you know, of going, yeah, you actually need to slow down. You need to accept you don't need to be a people pleaser for every single person in your life. It's shattering that illusion of control in a way for me. Does that make sense? That what I
Yes.
thought I was in control previously, like Krissy today in 2020, 2025, 2026 versus Krissy pre 2024 pre, knowing that it is okay to actually, now I know it's okay to say, I can't do that. I think, yeah, it's a loss of energy. That's the hardest pill to swallow for me, is that loss of energy. But now in this era, learning how to navigate that, learning my boundaries, learning that I can't do everything for everybody. I can, but just not all in one day. I'm like, give me till tomorrow. I can be with you tomorrow. Learning to manage that additional giving beyond my employment, giving that to people in smaller doses. So that's something I think I'm still going to have to continue to work on, because it is my nature to give everything to everybody else. I will always be the last, which is not the best thing when you have an autoimmune condition, you know. It's blowing, not that I'm blowing my own trumpet, it's a selfless act, and that I'm just like my mother, but she doesn't have autoimmune, so she can get away with it, you know. It's just something in my nature to just give to everybody. But I now know when today I will say, I can't do that tonight for you. Even with work, actually, I'll be like, can you give me till Wednesday? I will have that in your inbox by Wednesday. Learning even that to space things out and give back to myself. But no, it's your identity, learning my new identity, merging the old with the learning, this next chapter of my identity. It's a little bit of loss of control, which is hard to swallow, but it's okay. This is part of the growth. I think with autoimmune conditions, as your autoimmune changes, you change with it and you have to learn different tactics, different ways.
I was just curious, knowing this and the ways in which, you talked about your cognitive ability, and it's very clear, like, you're an introspective person. What do you wish you could, go back in time and say, or that someone had said to you in those moments when you felt all this pressure to, keep going, and all this sense of like, I need to maintain the way that I am because it's a core part of my identity. What do you wish you could say to yourself, or that someone had said to you in that moment?
Your core identity doesn't just have to be giving. Giving can be in so many different ways. And I think if I could go back in time, I probably should have listened to my husband a little bit more. Like, oh, you're too kind. You do too much for people. But I see that as an attack to who I am. But it's me. It's my nature, But that's also age and maturity. You think of yourselves when you're in your 20s. I think your 20s through to your 30s is a huge development phase. You are learning the way of life, when you hit 30, you look back at your 20-year-old version of yourself and like, what was I doing? Right? You're like,
Sure.
how did I even survive my 20s? Right?
Right, right.
Forget the autoimmune, just life in general. Then you get to like 35 and you look back at even your 30-year-old self and like, how did I think that was okay to be treated by people that way? And then as you get to 40s, you're like, no, it's quite simple. We came up, one of my oldest school friends is actually here across the room. We go back to 1996 and we actually, for joking, were asking ChatGPT, who are we? And I am soft and savage now, apparently. So I'm like, I like that. Soft and savage. So savage me would be like, simply, that doesn't entertain me. That doesn't give me anything back in mutual value. No, I don't have the time. But learning that voice within myself, I don't just think that's a health thing. I think that's maturity thing, like knowing when people are taking you for a ride, taking advantage of your kindness, things that my husband had seen. But there's 22 years between my husband and I, and he's never wanted to be condescending to our age difference and allowed me to go out and make my own mistakes. He's not, the guy going, well, when I was your age, this is what I used to do. There isn't any of that in our relationship. I've been allowed to fail. And he's like, not that I like to say I told you so. Of course you like to say I told you so. We all do, but this is what I was trying to explain to you. But I can't stop you from doing that because you've got to make these mistakes. So that is from a health perspective, a wealth perspective, from a social perspective, a family perspective. That development years, I think, plays a huge role into where we sit today. And we take those experiences into health and all other aspects of our life, because health does take a huge portion of that. It dominates a very large portion of our lives. Nobody can deny that. It is a daily operation. It's on your mind at least 80% of your day, right? You just can't not think about it. Medicine, food, sleep, naps, schedule, doctor's appointment, reminder, it's always there running in the background. So yeah, I think go back in time and be a dash less, a dash more when needed. Be more savage, less soft. I think that if I could have got that balance, what I have today back in my 20s and 30s, that probably also would have helped my immunity. I can't stop the immunity. It's a ticking time bomb anyway. But maybe I could have prolonged the damages, the physical damages that have occurred, that could have prevented those things from happening. But hey, life's a lesson. And this is what the journey is all about. And that's where the education, like this podcast, being able to share my own experience of saying, hey, had I known what my ultimate diagnosis was, I would have done things very differently. But also, I have had an epic life. I don't have any regrets. I've seen things that you could, it's a whole other podcast genre. We've been so blessed to have such amazing life and opportunities and work with incredible humans. And my husband's work's taken us around the world and given me insurance, private medical insurance, because if I didn't have that, another topic we can move on to, I wouldn't have got to the medications, the therapies, the treatments, and the access to care that I've got here now in the UAE. So my life is a privilege. So although my body may not have quite got the memo to keep up with the life, I don't regret anything. And I think it creates the person that we are today, the experiences that we have, So yeah, maybe be a bit more savage and less soft. That's what we're going to roll with.
Here for it.
I appreciate the introspection and the wisdom and the lessons that you have learned along your journey. Very much relate to that. I often think that sometimes it would have taken me a lot longer to learn those lessons without my autoimmune condition. But you mentioned back when you were diagnosed early on with Hashimoto's, just the realization of life is hard and this is how it's going to be because of autoimmune disease. How have you evolved from that stage to where you are now, where you're being a bit more savage and have a different lens on life?
I think through my work specifically, going down the clinical route, that's really influenced day-to-day life, because the comprehension level in medicine, actually the ability to self-discover through clinical documentation and stuff, that's played a huge, huge role in managing and thinking about that life today. Living with an autoimmune disease, it really sucks. People don't understand it. This is the hardest thing. I understand it clinically. Right. I've educated myself. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of clinical hours studying. I get it, but Joe Bloggs down the street doesn't understand. Right. And it's the external, my internal support network, my besties, my humans. There I can be authentically me. I can be healthy, non-flare Krissy, and I can also be flare Krissy. We both, those different people. I'm accepted in both ways. But I think outside that window, people not understanding actually the challenges day to day of living with that. This thing I find incredibly difficult. And I find it selfish that people can't educate themselves to know what half of the world is actually dealing with, but in different ways. Or it'll be like, yeah, my auntie's got something wrong with her thyroid, or she's got arthritis, or yeah, I know someone that happened to them. And it's like people not understanding that entire big picture of autoimmune. And I think if I'm correct, we talk about brain fog, it's kicked in. The question was about autoimmune today. Am I right?
Yes. How are you doing today? And what was that transformation?
Yeah, New York. I've brought New York up a few times. Your hometown, Chris, New York.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is a really important part of the pivoting point. And that's when everything changed for the good and the worst. It was the good, bad, and ugly episode of my life. So I would say, running up to New York, bit of context, I spoke earlier that I just became quite dismissive of like, it's just an autoimmune thing, right? I need to see the dermatologist. I've got a funky skin rash. I'll go see the dermatologist. Yeah, okay, might need my thyroxine adjusted. I'll just run to the private lab that I work with and just check my TSH levels, have a look. I don't look at antibodies anymore, so it doesn't matter. What's my thyroid doing? And I got quite complacent with it, of acceptance. Like, this is my life. I'm okay with it. Krissy's just going to run with it because that's what I do. But the little niggles, when you backtrack, I was having issues with skin, the hot flushes. Gynae's like, yeah, it's early perimenopause. We're seeing a shift in your hormones. I'm like, great, that's fine. I don't want children, so let's crack on and get this chapter of life done. That will make sense why my thyroid's not quite where it should be. And so I was just muddling for 3 years, basically. Probably procrastinating would be the right one in hindsight. But yeah. We had the most amazing trip to Paris. We did a transatlantic crossing on the Queen Mary 2, arrived in New York. Like, it's a girl's dream. I have never been to New York in my life. And here I am, arriving by ship, like my ancestors, right? crossed the Atlantic Ocean in March and landed in Brooklyn Harbor. And to see the Statue of Liberty lit up by night, what better way than to arrive in New York? I was so excited. I could have peed my pants. And the immigration guy was so scary. Oh, back in America, scary immigration guy, but we're in New York. And everything was like, that's like that movie. Oh, that's like Spider-Man was filmed. Oh, so you can just imagine me. So I am in New York, the Big Apple. I am very overstimulated. Like, it's loud, it's noisy, it's busy, it's quirky, it's alternative. And here I am from little country Wrestle Kamer, where we don't really have a city center, and I've just crossed the Atlantic peacefully. I am in New York, and I'm like, whoa. But we were having a great time. Skin was bothering me, slapping all my stuff on. I was taking the antibiotics that they gave me on the Queen Mary because my doctor wrote them to extend my prescription to try and deal with this weird skin thing that was going on. But I'm in New York and nothing's going to stop me. I am all about New York. I want to eat street food. I want to walk Central Park. I want to, go to Carrie Bradshaw's house and get a cupcake and do all the things that a Brit wants to do in New York. And my husband and I went for a really nice meal at a steak restaurant, a very expensive steak restaurant. I will not put the name on here. I can tell you after we've recorded if you just want to know, but not whilst we're recording. And at the booking, as I always do, I read a menu before I even book a reservation. I put a notice on the reservation that I carry an EpiPen. I have severe nut allergies. I've been doing this all my life, right? It's standard protocol. And if we get to the restaurant and I don't feel happy with the answers, we generally will walk out and find somewhere else to eat, And they're like, no problem, Mrs. Ward, we've got you covered. So we shared a lovely bottle of wine and I ordered my meal. I had steak tartare. One of my all-time favorite meals, by the way, is a good steak tartare. And then I had I have 2 starters in America because I can't cope with the portions because they're just too big for me. I can't do starters, main and dessert in New York. It's just way too much food. And so I had basically 2 starters. One was a starter and one came, which looked like a main course, which was my second starter. And we finished the meal and I was like, I just don't feel like it's really hot in here. And it was getting busy. The nightlife of New York's picking up and we're kind of early birds. So I was like, let's walk home and we've got that bit of wine left in the room. We can have a nightcap at home. And my husband was like, really good idea. So we go and we put the news on and there's the Heathrow London fire thing happening on in the background. I'm like, oh, we must check our flights and life's going on. And I'm starting to itch and I'm aggravated. So I've jumped into bed butt naked, I'm a Brit. My husband, we sleep in the nud, and I'm there and I'm like, I hope these hotel sheets don't have fleas. And I'm just like watching telly. I've had a few to drink, so I'm a bit tipsy and enjoying my vacation. And I've pulled the bed sheets back and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good. It's probably just an extension of my face, right? Denial, ostrich moment. My husband's passed out asleep and I'm like, I don't feel good. Something's wrong. I feel like I'm going to die. And then it clicked. Anaphylaxis, you have pending doom. I don't know if you know about this. Pending doom can kick in. And I'm like, but I haven't experienced anaphylaxis for a very, 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 very long time, as in being a teenager, because thank God I have never, other than hives, have I had another anaphylactic episode because I have stayed clear all these years. And I'm like, don't wake my husband up. He's sleeping. I don't want to disturb him. Go and get in the shower. And I've got out the shower and it's a tiny weeny hotel bathroom in New York because that's New York. And I've looked in the mirror and I am not in a good way. The hives are coming up. And I'm like, bag, get the EpiPen. I'm not anaphylactic at this point, but let's get the EpiPen out just in case. And I'm like, right, maybe the hotel has a doctor. So I've worked with my husband. I need to find a doctor. And they're like, oh, you need to go emergency care on 21st West Street and something Medicare. And I'm like, can you pin that on my map? Can we walk there? And they're like, and I'm like, my husband's like, I think we should get an Uber. And I'm like, okay. So we go to Medicare and they're like, yeah, you're having an allergic reaction. I'm like, but I have a history of anaphylactics. I'm really nervous. I'm supposed to be flying tomorrow and it's really painful. And I've got a bit of a fever. And this was the measles outbreak episode, in early 2020. Yeah. So I'm like, are you sure this is not measles? Can you check? Well, you don't have any other symptoms that align with measles. I'm like, can we check? Like, can we swap? They're like, no, given that you have allergic reactions and it started pretty much after you finished your meal, it's safe to say. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not convinced. I've got like a transatlantic flight to do in a few days. Like, if I've got measles, I can get quarantined in the Middle East and end up in the infectious diseases hospital. And so all of this is going on. So they've given me steroids. They've given me like antihistamines. I've got some stuff to lather all over my body. And my husband's like, we'll just see how it goes. And if not, we can go to another emergency center. But the steroids are already in. We did some intravenous, go back to the hotel. And thankfully, we were delayed because of the Heathrow fire, because we were transiting via London, which meant I could be butt naked on my bed in New York, slapping on stuff. Got on a plane, eventually, covered up. So I didn't look like I had measles because my skin was just raw, absolutely, because of blisters, the hives. My skin was just not in a good way. I'd already been talking to my dermatologist, like, do you agree with what they're doing? Blah, blah, blah. We land, they put us onto an Emirates flight instead of Gulf Air. So we went via Milan. And this is where it got really scary. I couldn't walk, but I had to walk because we had to get off the plane for security. And you know how they change over the aircraft for an hour. And we knew we were getting off. So I had my cream, my gel in my bag, and I had a change of clothes so I could shower in the lounge. And I'm using my hand luggage as a walking cane. My left side was just dead. And I thought, maybe I slept funny. We were business, so maybe I'd slept funny on the business seat, you know, like dead leg. And I'm dragging my leg and my husband's like, he walks really quick. And I'm like, wait for me. I've got little legs. Wait for me. I'm like, slow down. I'm like, I can't. My leg's not working. It's numb. I've got like really weird feeling sensation. And I've stripped off and now the hives are looking worse again. I'm like, this is not good. But I'm not doing this in Milan in transit. But we've got 6 hours to get back to Dubai. So we get on the plane and I literally just zonked straight out, sat upright in business. Who falls asleep upright in business for 6 hours? I did. I'm like, what a shame of that flat bed, right? You know. And then we land in Dubai, and Dubai is a huge airport. I don't know if you've ever been. It is massive. And it felt like I had a 5-kilometer walk and I'm almost tearing up. And I'm going to Mark's like, this is worse. I can't feel my hip now. I don't feel good. He's like, come on, we've just got to get through immigration and the driver's waiting and we'll get home. You can get a shower and we'll get some more medicine in you. You know, as you do, you just go through that normal thing. I'm like, I don't feel good. We get back to our home here in Ras Al Khaimah, crash, go to bed. And I woke up 2 hours later with the same sensation. I'm going to die. And I was very controlled. I wasn't erratic. I wasn't hysterical. I just woke up and I went, I'm going to die. And I got up, being British. I put the kettle on. We make a cup of tea in a crisis. And I'm looking at my hands and my hands, like I look like a minion who'd wedged 5 size too small rings and jewelry on. They weren't like that when I got off the plane. They were a little bit swollen, as we all are. But I have now got these minion hands and I've got ice blocks and olive oil literally pulling off jewelry whilst the kettle's boiling to go and wake my husband up. I could barely lift the kettle. I hadn't even looked in the mirror at this point. And I just said, I need you to wake up because I need to go to hospital. I'm just going to rinse my body. I have my go bag ready. I'd packed a bag because I was going to hospital. That was it. I was admitting myself because I was going to die. And he's like, don't be silly. You're not going to die. And he gets up. He's like, whoa, what's happened to you? And I literally was like a minion, like not yellow, just everything could just blow. I said, I don't know. And my skin was all these really veiny patterns on my skin. So you've got the highs, but there's these new things, right? And I'm like, that's a circulation. Maybe it's deep vein thrombosis. I'm going clinically like, I need to get to A&E. And we got there. And A&E were like, oh, this is non-emergency. I'm like, I don't walk into A&E. As an autoimmune, we don't walk into A&E unless we genuinely feel like we're dying, right? A fear of gaslighting. And, you know, you don't. You go to the emergency room when you genuinely have an emergency. We don't go for a cough or a sneeze. There is something seriously wrong when an autoimmune walks into an emergency room, right? You just don't. You wait for your appointment with your specialist. That's what we all do. And I got really cross. Yeah. And there's a language barrier thing, a culture barrier it's always there that you have to deal with. And then I met Dr. Slavica and she walked in. And she's from Serbia. She's very feisty. She said, yes. And I'm like, this happened in New York and this is my history. And I've got like, I don't feel good. I can't tell you what's wrong, but I'm numb. My legs won't work, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, this is MS, lupus or rheumatoid. This was her words. And I'm like, my husband's like, I don't think I like her. I'm like, she's a bit Eastern European. She's a bit scary. Like they are a little bit feisty, right? And I'm like, bedside manner, you know, so we're having this chat and the nurses are in, there is like ECG, there's IVs going and it's all happening around me and we're more concerned whether or not we like a bedside manner or not. And I'm like, oh, whatever. Because the Band-Aid labeling, oh yes, this is someone else's assumption that something's wrong with me. She's gone and shouted at all the ER staff, like, do this, do that. And she's come back and she's like, right, I need more context. I need this. So we've gone through. She's opened up my file at this hospital that I've had for 9 years and she's seen every appointment and she's like, I'm really sorry, but I don't agree with any of your clinical notes. I'm going to be running these tests. You have great insurance. And I just want to know if you're okay. We're going to be doing scans. We're going to be doing this. I'm like, fill your boots. And I surrendered. I just surrendered. I mean, I really wasn't very well. I surrendered. I'm like, do it. I don't care. I just feel like I'm going to die. So what would happen is it was a secondary shock. And I had hives in my esophagus, in my mouth, and we found that my kidneys were shutting down, my liver was failing, I had fluid on my lungs, my cardiac rhythm was all out of whack. They then put me on a ventilator and I'm allergic to Ventolin. Then went into anaphylactic shock. But the great thing was I already had the steroids IV in at the same time. Like, you know, so this is all happening in this 3 days. And I am like, and the more she keeps going, she's actually lovely. Once we got past she was doing her job as that doctor in call that day. I'm going kind of getting moved to outpatients with her. She gave me a voice. That woman, she saved my life. New York saved my life because if I had not had that allergic reaction and not got affected by flying and the treatments that I was given in New York, I never would have gone to the ER on that day. And it worked out, obviously, waiting for all the tests to come back. I don't carry the gene marker for rheumatoid antibody. Some people don't have. I was tested on the gene marker, but you have an RA factor, and there's actually 6 different markers. I tested positive on every RA factor, and that's why historically when other doctors had tested for RA, nobody had thought to look further, because I already had arthritis in my knee and I've been having knee injections, but that was the sport's fault. That was because I was an athlete, right? All these injuries were athletic. You're too young to have arthritis. And the mistake of the concept of rheumatoid arthritis. No, it's rheumatoid disease. So basically, that meal in New York, although they almost killed me, they've saved my life because my immune system had just been crashing and crashing. The skin rashes, all of it, you backtrack all of the last 3 years, well, actually from COVID, really, from the COVID times onwards, my body was just crashing and crashing to the point that that meal had sent my body into such a systemic inflammatory response that my organs were shutting down. I couldn't walk. Yeah, it literally broke me. So I am truly grateful to New York, because New York, your New York over there, it saved my life. That meal saved my life. That doctor on that day, because had she not been there, you talk about the quality of healthcare. It can be exceptional, but it can also be terrible here. Had it not been the right doctor on the right day, bear in mind that is my go-to private hospital. Nobody had got my diagnosis right. They were going to take my thyroid out 2 years ago. I was going to have a thyroidectomy because we said, well, take it out. If my body's attacking it, then the solution is remove it. They're doing it in Europe. You're still taking the same medications, right? Take it out. If that's going to fix how I feel. Thankfully, I saw my own sense. I'm like, let's just wait a little bit longer. We'll hang on that one, that organ of mine. So that is the New York saga. So all of these years, I was told I had Hashimoto's. I don't carry the gene marker for the RA antibody. Some people don't, but I was still seropositive, meaning I have a concrete diagnosis for an autoimmune disease. Here we are now, almost 12 months later. My Hashimoto's is completely in remission. I do not have Hashimoto's anymore. My thyroid function is completely normal. My antibodies are 0. They have not been 0. My thyroid has not been normal since my early 20s.
Wow.
So the question is, the Hashimoto's was the secondary autoimmune condition. So I've had rheumatoid the whole time, which when you then go back through the jaw, the TMJ, the nodule growth, the arthritic knees, the bone pains, like the phantom bone pains, the nerve pains, like the excuse the details here, but the stabbing butt pains that you get randomly. I have not had them since I started treatment, which means this was nerve ending pains. This was nerve inflammation, temporary vision loss, which is one of the other ones, the optic nerve inflammation. It's RA connected. The fibromyalgia, fibromyalgia is really a thing. It is a diagnosis, but actually everything that occurs in fibromyalgia is also in rheumatoid. Right. So they were using fibromyalgia because there's no diagnostics of fibro, right? And that's fine.
Yeah.
But the nerve pains, the arthritis, I can feel my femurs. You shouldn't feel your femur. I can feel it. It's like someone sits there and stabs a knife in it at night and drags a knife through my bones, like trying to describe those sort of pains. And it's fibromyalgia. Oh, then it was PCOS. That was the great one. Obviously, we'd done the cholesterol problem. I'm really unhealthy and I'm a diabetic. No, all of those are normal things with RA. And had somebody taken the whole picture where I've sat and given descriptive, I'm not trying to bore you guys, but, the descriptive, detailed report. These pains that I have are not normal. My rib cage should not hurt when I go to bed at night. Yes, I have changed my mattress.
Right.
I would have the inflammation in my rib cage, and that has completely gone. So now we're treating the RA. Pains that I have lived with for 20 years, bit by bit, are starting to go away. Things that I never thought would ever. I thought these were acceptable. This is my life. It should hurt. It's autoimmune. I've told it's painful. Keep calm and carry on. That is what you are fed. And now all of a sudden you're actually getting the treatment that your body needs to realize that for 20 years I have been in agony. When you have time, read my post, Dear Doctors. If I had the time and I wanted to invest that time, I would go back to each and one of them and said, how you failed me, don't fail somebody else. Please don't. fail somebody else the way you have failed me. Please do not question my marriage, my mental health. All of that probably does. It does affect your mental health. I'm not going to deny it. It makes you question yourself. It gets you to some of your lowest, darkest places when you're not believed, when you're you go to the doctors, it's supposed to be a safe place, and they manipulate you, they gaslight you. Especially women, we're dramatic, but yeah, that's especially out here in this part of the world. We are over dramatic. Apparently, we're too sensitive. And if you cry, please don't cry. Please don't cry. Take the Kleenex. I am crying out of frustration. You make me so angry. You don't listen to me. So to go, I think of 20 years of that was my life. Thank you, New York, for almost killing me because you freed me. That's how I feel. Nearly dying. Like watch that's the small part. I'm like, I survived that. I look at this last year. I couldn't walk in March. I couldn't walk. It wasn't until July. I was after doing loads of intra-articular injections, just trying to get everything stable, getting on the right medications, fighting insurance. It's another saga, but we all know insurance, so we don't need to delve into that. Fighting insurance for justification on the right therapies, adjusting to new therapies, getting off steroids. We've all been on that journey with autoimmune to not, I thought my life was over. And I've just been to Mauritius on vacation and nothing went wrong. No flares, nothing went wrong. I had a normal vacation. I loved my vacation. We weren't, apart from being a little bit tired and avoiding the sun as much as I could, being sensible, I had a normal vacation with my husband that didn't feel stressful, that didn't feel overwhelming, that I wasn't knackered when I came back from vacation. That is such a wonderful way to end 2025, which was my very best year of my life, but my worst at the same time. All combat when we talk about health, what a way to see we landed in Dubai at 10 to midnight. We got out the taxi at 0000 on the 1st of January. And I'm like, here's the marker for 2026. In Arabic, yalla, let's go. Let's do this 2026. Because I do believe we're on the pivoting point now. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be adjustments. There's going to be flares. But to finally feel seen and heard by one very special doctor who when we leave the Middle East, I'm going to miss her so very much. I want to take her with me. Okay. I was like, please come to England, please, because we're moving back to the UK this year. More for family, friends, nature, better climate, all the right reasons, We'll both work remotely still from the UK. Yeah, I think that is the pivoting point, that sometimes you can be freed if you get the right help. But finding that is a needle in a haystack in our worlds. Finding a good doctor is probably the hardest thing of all.
We've joked that you got to date around to find the right doctor.
Yes.
Well, I've dated a lot.
Krissy, you truly have a remarkable story and you're an incredible person. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Can you share with our community where they can follow you and find out more about you online?
Yeah, so there is my Instagram, which is The Patient's Paradox, that I started this year because I finally decided, no, I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I want to stand up and shout out a little bit more, not be ashamed to share my journey, because obviously our aspect of feeling like I would fail as a professional. Now I'm using my work knowledge to help other people advocate. But it's my personal journey as well, but just combining both. Facebook is Krissy Ward, but it's connected to that Instagram. So that's the easiest way to find me. There's a lot of humor, a lot of British sarcasm, and there's also some good information, but I found that the RA community was really quite small. So when we start to talk about methotrexate treatments, biologicals, my experience with them, I couldn't find what I needed when I was being offered these treatments. So I wanted to make a platform accessible of my personal experience of how I navigated my choice of treatments, and actually being lucky to have the option of choice of treatments, which is a blessing. So that's kind of really what it's all about, and just muddling through expat life, the highs, the lows, and everything in between, and my crazy cat and my crazy friends, and just being me, this version of me in 2025 and 2026 after my New York vacation.
That's it. Well, Krissy, they say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. You survived New York for sure.
I survived New York. Can I get a t-shirt for that, please?
Thank you very much, Krissy.
Thank
We
you.
so appreciate and love having you. To our community, make sure you check out invigorateyourjourney.com and then the Patient Paradox and find Krissy on Instagram. Until next time, take care. Peace.
Bye.